Ladies and gentlemen, in every heart there exists a question that transcends time, culture, and creed: who is God? This question is not merely academic, it is the foundation of meaning, purpose, and identity. To understand who God is, we must look beyond tradition and ritual. God is not a concept to be debated, He is a reality to be experienced, a truth to be embraced. Everything that exists in this vast universe finds its origin in the one who spoke it into being. The intricate balance of the cosmos, the beauty of the earth, and the very breath you draw right now are not accidents of chance. They are the deliberate works of a creator whose power is infinite and whose wisdom is unfathomable. Consider the stars scattered across the night sky in patterns too vast to count. They were placed with intention, each one a testament to the majesty of their maker. The earth, with its mountains, oceans, and life teeming in every corner, reflects a design that cannot be denied. It's not randomness that causes rivers to flow, plants to grow, or seasons to change. These are the works of a mind far beyond human comprehension, a mind that conceived all things with purpose. This same creator gave humanity dominion over creation, not as owners but as stewards, charged with the responsibility to nurture and preserve what has been entrusted to us. Every living thing, from the smallest cell to the largest creature, bears the fingerprints of this creator. Think about the complexity of life itself, the harmony in nature, the balance in ecosystems, the rhythm of the tides. They all echo a divine orchestration. This is not a display of raw power alone, but of careful, intentional design. The creator's handiwork speaks not just of greatness, but also of care, for even the smallest detail has meaning. And yet creation is more than a reflection of power and wisdom. It is a revelation of love. It was not created out of necessity or obligation, but as an expression of generosity and relationship. This is why the Creator fashioned humanity uniquely, breathing into us a spirit that seeks meaning, connection, and purpose. Everything you see, the expanse of the heavens, the beauty of the earth, the life that surrounds you, exists not merely to be admired, but to point you back to the one who made it all. To acknowledge this truth is to begin to understand the depth of your existence. You are not here by accident. You are part of a grand design, born of a creator who sees you, knows you, and calls you to step into the fullness of your purpose. Creation in all its splendor is a constant reminder of where you come from and to whom you belong. God is the supreme authority over all that exists. His sovereignty is not a mere concept or abstract idea. It is a living, undeniable reality that governs every aspect of the universe. There is no higher power than God, no force or influence that can challenge His will or His purpose. The idea that God is sovereign means that He has the final say over all things. Every event, every movement, every destiny is subject to His divine authority. His rule is not just a matter of control, it is a matter of divine right, grounded in His eternal nature and infinite wisdom. Unlike human leaders or rulers whose authority can be questioned or overthrown, God's sovereignty is absolute and unshakable. His power does not waver in the face of challenges, and His purpose does not shift in response to human error. He is unchanging, steadfast, and unyielding. While the world may seem chaotic, unpredictable, or even unjust, it is not outside of God's sovereign control. There is nothing that escapes His attention or is beyond His reach. This sovereignty extends not only over the physical world, but also over the spiritual realm. He governs the forces of nature, the course of history, and the affairs of men. Nothing happens without His permission, and nothing can thwart His plans. While we may not always understand why things unfold the way they do, we can trust that the one who holds all things together is working out His divine will, even in the most difficult circumstances. God's sovereignty also means that He is the final judge of all things. He sets the standards of what is right and wrong, of what is good and evil. No one can challenge His judgments, and no one can dispute His wisdom. His decisions are perfect because His understanding is beyond measure. We may not always agree with His methods or timing, but His sovereignty assures us that His ways are higher than our own, and His purpose will ultimately prevail. Furthermore, God's sovereignty gives us a profound sense of security. In a world filled with uncertainty and turmoil, the knowledge that God reigns over all things provides peace. No matter what happens around us, we can rest in the assurance that God is in control. The challenges we face, the struggles we endure, the victories we win, they are all part of His greater plan. God's sovereignty means that he is actively involved in our lives, shaping us, guiding us, and working all things together for our good. When we come to understand that God is sovereign, we stop trying to control every aspect of our lives. We release the burden of needing to figure everything out or to make things happen on our own. Instead, we learn to trust his timing, his wisdom, and his plan. In surrendering to his sovereignty, we find freedom, we find rest, we find purpose. And we find the confidence to move forward, knowing that the one who reigns over all is also the one who is with us, guiding us every step of the way. God is eternal, a reality that stands beyond the confines of time. The very essence of God is timeless. He has no beginning and no end. The human mind struggles to grasp this concept because we are bound by time. Our lives, our decisions, and our understanding of the world all function within the limits of past, present, and future. But God exists outside of these constraints. He is not subject to the ticking of a clock, the passing of seasons, or the fleeting moments of human history. He simply is. To say that God is eternal is to say that he has always existed and will always exist. There was never a moment when he was not. Before time itself began, before the first stars were created or the earth formed, God was. And long after this world has passed away, long after the universe has reached its final moment, God will remain. His eternal nature means that he is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end of all things. This eternal nature of God brings both awe and comfort. It means that God's wisdom is not limited by time. He sees the entire course of history from beginning to end, and nothing takes him by surprise. He is not reacting to events as they unfold, but is the steady, eternal force that works within time to bring about his ultimate purpose. While we are confined to our moments, our decisions, and our human experience, God sees it all, the full picture, the eternal narrative of creation, of humanity, and of his divine plan. God's eternal nature also means that he is unchanging. Where everything around us shifts, where human ideas and systems fluctuate, God remains the same. He is not subject to moods or whims. His promises are as true today as they were in the beginning. His character is steadfast and unmovable. While we as humans may experience growth, failure, change, and uncertainty, God stands as the constant, unshaken by the winds of time. This eternal constancy brings with it the assurance that we can trust God fully. We may not always understand his ways or his timing, but we can trust that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. There is security in his unchanging nature. When everything else is in flux, when we are uncertain about our future, when life feels unpredictable, God remains steady. His eternal truth and promises are the bedrock upon which we build our lives. Furthermore, because God is eternal, his plans and purposes transcend generations. He is not just concerned with our fleeting lives, he is concerned with the bigger picture. He sees the legacy of creation, the unfolding of nations, and the eternal destiny of souls. His work is not limited to our moment in time. He is laying the foundation for something far greater than we can comprehend. This eternal perspective invites us to see our lives not in isolation, but as part of a much larger story, one that spans eternity and is being written by the hand of the Creator. When we realize that God is eternal, we also begin to understand our place in this grand narrative. We are not just here by accident or for a short time. We are part of an eternal purpose, a divine plan that stretches across time and into the vastness of eternity. Our lives have significance not just for the present, but for the future, and we are called to align ourselves with God's eternal purpose. In this light, we begin to see our challenges, our struggles, and our triumphs as moments that are part of God's timeless plan. In the face of all that changes, it is the eternal nature of God that remains our hope, our anchor, and our ultimate assurance. To know that the creator of the universe is eternal is to know that he is always with us, always in control, and always working out his perfect plan for our lives. God is spirit. This means that his true nature is not confined to the physical world as we know it. We are surrounded by the tangible, the material, and the visible things we can touch, see, and experience with our senses. But God exists in a realm far beyond the physical. He is not bound by the limitations of matter, space, or time. His essence transcends the natural world, and he interacts with creation not through physical form, but through the power of his spirit. To understand that God is spirit is to understand that he operates in ways that go beyond our human comprehension. He is not confined to a single location as we are. While we move from place to place, constrained by our physical bodies, God is omnipresent. He is everywhere, fully present in all places at once. This means that his influence is not limited to any specific space or time. He is at work in every corner of the earth, in every moment, whether we are aware of it or not. To encounter God, then, is not about seeking physical proof or relying solely on what we can see with our eyes. It's about connecting with him in the spiritual realm. God's presence cannot be measured by human standards or bound by human expectations. He moves in ways that are often unseen, working in the hearts of people, in the quiet moments, in the stillness of the soul. His work is felt, not just seen. His presence is known not through outward evidence, but through the inward stirring of our spirit. Because God is spirit, our worship of him is not about external rituals or formalities. It is about engaging with him in spirit and truth. True worship is not confined to a building or a set of actions. It is an attitude of the heart, a recognition that God is not distant or detached, but present within us, around us, and beyond us. To worship God in spirit is to recognize that he is not a God to be found merely in the physical world, but in the deepest parts of our being. We worship God when we acknowledge his spiritual presence and allow him to move within us. Understanding that God is spirit also means that we must approach him with a different perspective. We cannot relate to him simply through our intellect or our physical senses. To truly know God, we must go beyond what we can understand with our minds or experience with our bodies. We must engage with him on a deeper level through the Spirit. The Holy Spirit, God's presence in the world, is the bridge between the physical and the spiritual, enabling us to experience the divine in ways we could not otherwise. This spiritual nature of God also teaches us that our own identity is more than physical. While we are housed in physical bodies, we are first and foremost spiritual beings. We were created in the image of God. And that image is rooted in our spirit, not our flesh. Our true nature is spiritual. And when we recognize this, we begin to live in alignment with who we are meant to be. Our purpose is not found in what we do physically, but in how we relate to God spiritually. It is through the Spirit that we find our true fulfillment, our true connection to our Creator. When we grasp the reality that God is Spirit, we understand that he is not distant or unreachable. He is near to us, within us, calling us to engage with him on a deeper, more personal level. He invites us into a relationship that transcends the material world, a relationship that is built on the foundation of the Spirit. This means that regardless of our circumstances or physical limitations, we can always connect with God. He is not confined to a place or a time. He is spirit, and he is present with us at all times. This truth invites us to live with a greater sense of awareness and purpose. It challenges us to look beyond the physical world to see the spiritual reality that is always at work around us. When we begin to live in this understanding, we begin to recognize God's hand in every moment, in every circumstance, and in every relationship. We no longer see the world simply through our physical eyes, but through the eyes of the Spirit, where God's presence and power are always active and always at work. At the core of God's nature is love, a love that transcends every human understanding. God's love is not just an emotion or a passing feeling, but the very essence of who he is. It is the foundation of everything he does, the driving force behind creation itself. His love is not based on our actions, our worthiness, or our ability to return that love. It exists as a pure, unchanging, and perfect force that flows from him to us, regardless of who we are or what we've done. When we speak of God's love, we are speaking of something that is limitless, unconditional, and selfless. It is not a love that looks for something in return, but one that freely gives no matter the response. The love of God is not motivated by our behavior, but by his nature. It is not transactional. It does not require a condition to be met. His love is constantly offered, and he loves us simply because he is love. The perfect love of God does not change based on our performance. It is consistent, steady, and eternal. This love is the reason for all that exists. The earth, the heavens, and all that fills them were created out of love. God did not create the world out of obligation or necessity, but out of a desire to share his love with all that he had made. Everything in creation is an expression of this love, a reflection of his desire to pour himself out into the world. And among all that he created, humanity was made in a special way to receive and reflect his love. God's love is also a sacrificial love. It is a love that gives freely and fully, even at great personal cost. When God chose to enter into human history, he did so not to rule or control, but to serve and to sacrifice. His love was demonstrated in the most powerful way through the sacrifice of his son. This act was not about obligation or duty. It was an expression of the deepest kind of love. God chose to lay down his own life for the sake of humanity, showing us that love is not just words, it is action. True love involves sacrifice, and God's love was demonstrated through the ultimate act of giving. To know the love of God is to understand that love is not just an idea or a concept, but something to be experienced deeply and personally. His love is available to everyone, regardless of our past, our mistakes, or our shortcomings. No one is beyond the reach of his love. In a world that often feels broken, fractured, and unkind, the love of God is a reminder that there is a love that cannot be shaken. His love is steady, unmovable, and enduring. It is a love that does not judge, does not condemn, and does not give up. This love of God calls us to respond. It calls us to open our hearts and receive it, not because we deserve it, but because he freely offers it. When we receive God's love, we are changed, we are transformed by it. It doesn't just affect our feelings, it impacts the way we live, the way we see others, and the way we understand our purpose. The love of God compels us to love as he loves, to reflect his love in all we do. It teaches us that love is not just a feeling, but an action, a choice we make every day to live in a way that reflects his grace, mercy, and kindness. God's love is also a perfect love. Unlike human love, which is often flawed and imperfect, God's love is complete, whole, and flawless. There is no selfishness in God's love, no hidden agenda, no manipulation. It is the purest form of love that seeks only the good of others, love that heals, restores, and transforms. It is this perfect love that casts out fear, that brings peace, and that gives hope. It is the foundation upon which our identity is built. When we know that we are loved by God, we begin to understand our worth and value, not based on external achievements or human approval, but on the unshakable love of the Creator. And this love of God does not leave us where we are, it pushes us forward. It calls us into a greater understanding of who we are meant to be. God's love is not passive or distant. It actively pursues us, calling us into a deeper relationship with him. It is a love that invites us to walk with him, to align our lives with his will, and to become vessels of that same love to the world around us. When we fully grasp God's love for us, we are empowered to love others in the same way, unconditionally, sacrificially, and completely. The love of God is not just a theological principle, it is a living, breathing reality that shapes the way we live. When we understand that God is love, we come to realize that our lives are meant to be lived out of that love. We are created to reflect his love, to be conduits of that love to a world that desperately needs it. Love is the force that sustains us, guides us, and ultimately gives our lives meaning. God's love is the most powerful force in the universe, and it is available to us at all times, a never-ending well that we can draw from, be filled by, and pour out to others. God is the creator of all things, and this truth establishes the foundation for everything we know about him and our existence. To say that God is the creator is to acknowledge that everything in the universe, everything that has life, purpose, and order comes from him. The very act of creation is an expression of his divine nature and power. He spoke and things came into being. He commanded and life emerged. The world, the stars, the oceans, the animals, and humanity, all of it exists because God willed it into existence. Creation is not a random occurrence. It is the intentional, purposeful act of a creator whose mind is full of wisdom and whose heart is filled with love for what he makes. The act of creation is not just about making things, it is about establishing purpose. God does not create without intention. Every detail of creation, no matter how small or large, has a reason for being. From the vastness of the galaxies to the intricate design of a single atom, Every part of creation points to the mind of the Creator. When God created the world, He spoke with a purpose in mind, and He formed everything with intention. This reveals a critical truth: God's creation is never meaningless. Everything He creates, including us, has a purpose, a role to play in His greater plan. To understand that we are created by God is to understand that we are not here by chance or coincidence. We were made with intention, with purpose, and with a specific role to fulfill in the grand scheme of creation. God's creativity is unmatched. He is the original source of all creativity in the world. Every artist, every inventor, every creator who has ever existed is reflecting in some way the image of the Creator. The beauty and complexity of nature, the vastness of the cosmos, and the diversity of life on earth are all testimonies to the boundless creativity of God. His creativity is not limited or finite, it is infinite and endless. He constantly brings forth new life, new ideas, and new possibilities. Even as creation continues to unfold, He is always at work, adding layers of beauty, complexity, and wonder to the world He made. But creation is not just about the physical world. It's also about the spiritual realm, which is just as real and significant. God, as Creator, is responsible for both the material world we can see and the spiritual realm we cannot. Both realms are intricately woven together, working in harmony according to God's divine purpose. The spiritual world influences the physical world, and the physical world reflects the spiritual truths of God. To see creation in its fullness is to recognize that it is not just about what we can touch and see, but also about what we cannot see, about the unseen forces, the spiritual laws, and the divine order that govern the universe. As the Creator, God also maintains sovereignty over His creation. His role does not end with creation. He is actively involved in the sustaining and governing of everything He has made. The earth continues to spin, the seasons continue to change, and life continues to exist, not because of chance, but because God is actively involved in upholding it all. Creation is not a one-time event that ended with the making of the world. It is a continuous act. Every moment, every breath, every heartbeat is sustained by God, the Creator. This reveals a profound truth: we are dependent on God at every moment of our lives. Without His sustaining hand, life would not exist. We are not just created by God, we are continually being sustained by Him. In His creation, God has also established order. The natural laws that govern the world, the laws of physics, biology, and even morality, are a reflection of His divine order. God is a God of order, not chaos. From the precise orbits of planets to the cycles of nature, everything works together in harmony. This order reflects the wisdom and intelligence of the Creator. It shows us that God does not act haphazardly or without thought. Everything He does is in perfect alignment with His nature and His will. The complexity and precision of creation reveal that God is not just a creator, but a designer, one who has meticulously crafted everything according to a divine plan. God's creation also points to His glory. Creation in all its diversity and beauty reflects His greatness. The majesty of a mountain range, the vastness of the ocean, the intricacies of the human body, all of these things point back to the greatness of God. When we behold the wonders of creation, we are meant to be reminded of the Creator's greatness, power, and beauty. Creation in its fullness is meant to draw us to God. It is not just a backdrop for our lives, it is a testimony to the power and wisdom of the Creator. When we look at the world around us, we are called to see beyond the physical. We are called to see God's hand at work in every aspect of life. As the Creator, God has also entrusted humanity with a unique role. He has given us dominion over the earth, a responsibility to steward His creation. This means that we are not just consumers of creation, but caretakers. We are entrusted with the responsibility to nurture, protect, and preserve the world God has made. Our actions impact creation, and we are called to reflect God's nature as Creator by caring for the world with the same wisdom, love, and order that He demonstrated in His creation. Ultimately, to understand God as Creator is to understand that our lives are not random. We are created with a purpose, with a role in God's ongoing work of creation. We are part of His divine plan, and our lives have significance that stretches beyond our individual selves. As the Creator, God not only made us, but continues to shape us, mold us, and guide us in fulfillment of His greater purpose. When we recognize that God is the Creator of all things, we begin to see our place in the world more clearly. We are not isolated beings. We are part of a divine masterpiece, intricately woven into the fabric of creation, designed to reflect the glory and purpose of the Creator. God is sovereign over all creation. His sovereignty means that He is the ultimate authority, the supreme ruler of the universe, and the final arbiter of all that happens in the world. Nothing occurs outside of His will, and nothing can stand against His purposes. The sovereignty of God is not just a theological concept, it is a foundational truth that shapes our understanding of everything in the world around us. To acknowledge God's sovereignty is to acknowledge that He holds power over everything, over nations, over nature, over human history, and over the very lives of individuals. He is not only present within creation, He is the driving force behind it all. God's sovereignty implies that He has absolute control over all things. While we may have the ability to make choices and act according to our will, God's plan and purpose remain unchallenged. His will is ultimate and cannot be thwarted. The events of history, the rise and fall of nations, the events of our personal lives, all of these are within His sovereign control. God is not a passive observer of the world. He is actively involved in shaping its course. The fact that the universe operates with such order and precision is evidence of God's sovereign hand at work. Every event, every moment, every action is allowed or permitted by God, and in the end, everything will work together according to His will. When we consider God's sovereignty, it also speaks to His divine wisdom. His sovereignty is not arbitrary or capricious. He does not rule from a place of randomness or injustice. His decisions are always in perfect alignment with His perfect wisdom, justice, and love. This means that even when we don't understand the circumstances or events happening in our lives, we can trust that God's sovereign hand is at work. His wisdom is beyond our comprehension, and though we may not always see the full picture, we can trust that He is working everything for a higher purpose. His sovereignty assures us that no matter how chaotic or difficult life may seem, there is an order behind it all, a divine plan unfolding according to His will. God's sovereignty also demonstrates His authority over all human affairs. Every ruler, every government, every leader is subject to His authority. The Bible teaches us that God raises up leaders and removes them according to His will. He is the ultimate judge of nations and individuals, and He holds all authority in His hands. No power, no influence, no force in the world can stand against the sovereignty of God. His authority is absolute and all-encompassing. This means that we are never without hope, even in the face of unjust rulers or oppressive systems. God is the final authority, and ultimately His justice will prevail. This sovereignty also means that God is the rightful owner of everything. Everything in existence belongs to Him, and He governs it according to His divine will. The earth and everything in it are His creation, and He has placed humanity as stewards over it. To understand God's sovereignty is to understand that we are not the ultimate owners of anything. Our lives, our possessions, and even our time are not ours to do with as we please. They belong to God, and we are entrusted with them for a time. This realization shifts our perspective on life. We begin to see that we are not the center of the universe God is. We are His creation, His servants, and His stewards. Our lives are meant to be lived in alignment with the sovereign will of the sovereign will, not in pursuit of our own self-centered desires. God's sovereignty also means that He is in control of the future. The future is not uncertain or unpredictable in the way we often perceive it. Though we may not know what tomorrow holds, we can be confident that God already knows, and His plans for the future are secure. His sovereignty extends to every part of time, past, present, and future. He is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Nothing takes God by surprise. Nothing is beyond His control. He has already determined the end from the beginning, and His purpose will be fulfilled regardless of the circumstances. The future may seem uncertain to us, but it is already secure in God's hands. This truth also brings comfort in times of trial. When we face hardships, when we walk through seasons of suffering or uncertainty, we can take solace in the fact that God's sovereignty is not limited by our circumstances. He is still in control. The challenges we face are not outside of his plan. He is with us in our struggles, working his purposes through even the most difficult times. His sovereignty ensures that nothing in our lives is without purpose. Every trial, every challenge, and every obstacle is part of his greater plan, and ultimately he will bring about good from it. We may not understand the purpose at the moment, but we can trust that God's sovereignty is at work, orchestrating everything for our ultimate benefit and his glory. When we recognize the sovereignty of God, we are called to submit to his will. To understand that God is sovereign is to recognize that we are not in control, he is. This recognition invites us to surrender our lives to him, to trust in his wisdom and his timing, and to align our actions with his purposes. In a world where we are often taught to fight for control and assert our own will, surrendering to God's sovereignty is a radical act of faith. It is a declaration that we trust in his authority, that we believe he is good, and that we believe his plans for us are better than our own. Ultimately, the sovereignty of God brings peace and assurance. It reminds us that we are not at the mercy of random chance, fate, or the whims of other people. We are held in the hands of a sovereign God who is in control of everything. This truth enables us to live with confidence, knowing that no matter what happens in our lives or in the world around us, God is still sovereign, still reigning, and still working everything according to his perfect will. God is the source of all truth. In a world where truth is often subjective, relative, or elusive, God's truth stands as the ultimate standard by which everything is measured. Truth is not a concept that can be manipulated or shaped according to human opinion or circumstances. It is unchanging, unwavering, and eternal, just as God himself is. God's truth is absolute. It is not dependent on time, culture, or human perception. His truth transcends every human understanding. It stands as the eternal foundation of all that is real, good, and right in the universe. To say that God is the source of all truth is to acknowledge that all knowledge and wisdom come from him. Every discovery, every advancement in science, every new understanding of the natural world, and every insight into the human condition is merely a reflection of God's infinite wisdom. Human beings do not create truth, we discover it, we uncover it, and we seek to align our lives with it. But the source of all truth, the wellspring from which all wisdom flows, is God. He is the creator of truth, the author of knowledge, and the foundation of all understanding. Truth is not just a collection of facts, it is the embodiment of God's nature. God's truth is a reflection of his holiness, his righteousness, and his goodness. When we speak of truth in relation to God, we are not simply talking about a set of rules or doctrines. We are speaking of the very character of God. To know the truth is to know God. To align ourselves with the truth is to align ourselves with his divine nature. Truth in its purest form is not just something we learn or observe, it is something we live and experience. To live according to God's truth is to live according to his character, to reflect his nature in the way we think, speak, and act. God's truth is also a guiding light for our lives. In a world filled with confusion, lies, and deception, God's truth serves as a beacon, illuminating the path for those who seek it. God's word, which is the ultimate expression of his truth, provides the direction and the wisdom we need to navigate the complexities of life. When we align ourselves with God's truth, we are no longer wandering aimlessly, lost in the darkness of uncertainty. Instead, we walk in the light of his wisdom and understanding. His truth is not a distant, abstract idea. It is a living, active force that guides us in our daily decisions and actions. Moreover, God's truth is not always easy to accept or understand because it often challenges our natural inclinations. God's truth does not conform to the ways of the world or the values of human culture. It calls us to a higher standard, one that is rooted in righteousness, justice, and love. It asks us to lay down our own desires, our own understanding, and to submit to the greater wisdom and knowledge of God. His truth often goes against the grain of human wisdom, confronting our pride, our selfishness, and our tendency to live for our own benefit. But it is precisely this truth that leads to true freedom. When we live in alignment with God's truth, we are set free from the lies and deceptions that bind us. The truth liberates us from the chains of sin, pride, and ignorance, enabling us to live in the fullness of God's purpose for our lives. God's truth is also redemptive. In the face of sin and brokenness, God's truth offers a way of restoration and healing. His truth exposes the lies and falsehoods that have led to our pain, our separation from Him, and our struggles in life. But it does not leave us there. The truth of God's love, His forgiveness, and His grace offer a way to reconcile with Him, to heal from our wounds, and to restore what has been lost. God's truth does not condemn us, it offers us hope. It is a truth that offers grace and mercy, calling us to repentance and restoration, offering us the opportunity to be made whole again. As the source of all truth, God's word is central to our understanding of reality. The Bible, as the written expression of God's truth, reveals to us the deeper realities of life, of humanity, and of God's plan for the world. It is not a collection of ancient stories or moral teachings. It is the living word of God, full of power, life, and revelation. Through the scriptures, God reveals His will, His character, and His plan for humanity. It is through His word that we come to know the truth that sets us free and equips us to live according to His purposes. The more we immerse ourselves in God's word, the more we are transformed by His truth, our minds renewed, and our lives aligned with His will. This truth also calls us to responsibility. To know God's truth is to be accountable to it. It is not enough to simply know the truth. We are called to live by it. The truth of God requires a response. It challenges us to live with integrity, to walk in holiness, and to reflect His character in our interactions with others. Living according to God's truth is not just about knowing the right things. It is about embodying those truths in our actions, in our relationships, and in our character. It requires us to be honest with ourselves, to confront our flaws and shortcomings, and to submit our will to God's. The truth of God is transformative, but it demands that we align ourselves with it completely. Living in God's truth also means living in freedom. God's truth liberates us from the lies that keep us bound in fear, insecurity, and sin. In the world, we are often told that freedom is found in pursuing our own desires and following our own path, or in seeking our own happiness. But true freedom, according to God's truth, is found in surrendering our lives to His will. It is found in living in alignment with His purposes, in following His guidance, and in seeking His glory above all else. When we live in God's truth, we are freed from the emptiness of self-centered living, and we find fulfillment in living for His kingdom. Ultimately, God's truth is the foundation of all that is good, right? And just. It is the lens through which we understand the world, the guide that leads us to God's purposes, and the standard by which we measure all things. To know God's truth is to know the very nature of reality itself, to understand the world as it was meant to be, and to live in a way that reflects the righteousness, holiness, and justice of the Creator. Truth is not just a concept to be learned, it is a life to be lived, a way of being in the world that aligns us with God's divine order and purpose. God is the giver of all purpose. Purpose is the driving force behind creation, and it is through God's purpose that everything in the universe exists. Without purpose, there is no meaning, no direction, and no understanding of why we are here. Everything that has been created, whether visible or invisible, great or small, exists for a specific reason, and it is God's purpose that dictates that reason. The universe operates according to a divine plan, a blueprint laid out by God from the very beginning of time, and everything that happens is a manifestation of that purpose being worked out in history. God's purpose is not limited to the grand scope of the universe or the destiny of nations. It extends to each individual life. Every person was created with a specific purpose in mind, a unique plan that only they can fulfill. The significance of life is not found in mere existence, but in the fulfillment of the purpose for which we were created. God has intricately designed each individual with the potential gifts and abilities necessary to accomplish that purpose. Understanding that each person has a divine purpose is crucial to understanding the meaning of life itself. It means that every person, no matter their circumstances, has intrinsic value and worth because they were created with intention and significance. In this world, many search for meaning in external things, wealth, success, status, or pleasure. However, true fulfillment is not found in these fleeting pursuits. God's purpose for our lives is far deeper and more profound than the temporary things of this world. The pursuit of purpose requires a deeper understanding of who we are and why we are here. It is a journey that moves beyond the physical and material and leads us into the realm of the spiritual, where we begin to see our lives as part of a larger story. This is where true fulfillment and peace are found, not in what we accumulate, but in aligning ourselves with God's plan for our lives. To understand our purpose, we must first understand that we were made for a relationship with God. Our relationship with Him is not a byproduct of our existence, it is the reason we exist. The relationship with the Creator is the foundation upon which all purpose is built. Everything else flows from that relationship. When we are connected to God, we are able to discover the divine calling upon our lives, the unique purpose that He has ordained for us. This relationship is not passive. It requires engagement, communication, and alignment. It means listening for His voice, seeking His guidance, and living in obedience to His will. It is through this relationship that we find direction and clarity as we discover who we are in light of who He is. The discovery of purpose is not always easy. It involves a process of seeking, discovering, and sometimes wrestling with our understanding of who we are and why we are here. God's purpose for our lives may not always be immediately clear, and at times we may find ourselves confused or uncertain about the next step. But we can take comfort in knowing that God is faithful and that He will reveal His purpose to us in His perfect timing. The path to purpose is often one of gradual revelation, where God unfolds the details of His plan as we walk in obedience and faith. It may require patience, trust, and perseverance, but the journey is worth it. Furthermore, understanding God's purpose for our lives involves understanding that we are not the center of our own purpose. God is. Our purpose is not defined by our desires or ambitions, but by God's will for us. It is through surrendering our own plans, our own dreams, and our own ideas of success that we begin to align ourselves with God's greater plan. This may mean letting go of our own understanding of what is best for us and trusting that God knows the way better than we do. When we submit ourselves to God's will, we find true purpose, one that transcends our own limitations and connects us to the divine story being written in the world. God's purpose is also not just for personal fulfillment or self-actualization. It extends beyond us to the world around us. The purpose that God has given to us is not merely for our own benefit. It is for the good of others, for the advancement of His kingdom, and for the fulfillment of His divine plan for creation. We are all part of a larger narrative, one that is unfolding in every moment of history. Our lives, our actions, and our decisions contribute to that larger story. We are called to use our unique gifts and abilities to serve others, to build up the community, and to be a reflection of God's love and grace to the world. When we live in alignment with God's purpose, we begin to experience the fullness of life that He intended for us. There is a peace that comes when we are living in purpose, a peace that transcends circumstances because we know that we are fulfilling the very reason for which we were created. This peace does not depend on external success or the approval of others. It comes from knowing that we are fulfilling God's will for our lives. When we are in the center of God's purpose, we experience a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that we are exactly where we are meant to be. God's purpose also equips us for the challenges we will face in life. It gives us the strength to endure difficult times, knowing that our struggles are not in vain, but are part of the process of fulfilling our divine calling. Purpose gives us perspective. It reminds us that life is not just about the present moment or the temporary challenges we face. It is about the eternal plan that God has for us. And when we face difficulties or setbacks, we can trust that God is using them to shape us, refine us, and prepare us for the next phase of our purpose. Ultimately, fulfilling God's purpose for our lives is the key to living a life of meaning, fulfillment, and impact. It is not about pursuing our own agendas or striving to live up to society's expectations. It is about submitting ourselves to the Creator, discovering His will, and walking in the path that He has set before us. When we align ourselves with God's purpose, we experience the deepest sense of satisfaction and peace that is possible. We are living the life that we were always meant to live, one that brings glory to God and serves others in love. This is the true purpose of our existence: to know God, to serve His will, and to fulfill the unique calling that He has placed on our lives. God is the eternal provider, the one who supplies all that we need, both materially and spiritually. From the very beginning, the Creator established himself as the source of everything we require for life and purpose. He designed the world with abundant provision, ensuring that everything in it works together to meet the needs of his creation. It is not by chance that we exist in a world where our needs are met. God's provision is not a reaction to human effort. It is the natural result of his divine will. In every moment, he sustains, nourishes, and equips us with all we need to fulfill our purpose on earth. God's provision goes far beyond material needs, though they are important. We often focus on physical sustenance, food, shelter, money, and the necessities of life because these are the things we see and feel most directly. But true provision encompasses far more than that. God is the provider of wisdom, strength, creativity, and health. These intangible provisions are just as necessary for life's purpose as any material possession. In every area of our existence, God provides what we need to thrive, grow, and fulfill the destiny he has set before us. Without his provision, we would not have the strength to endure trials, the insight to make wise decisions, or the ability to love and serve others. When we consider God as the provider, we must recognize that his provision is not merely transactional. He is not a distant, detached source who gives only when demanded. Rather, he is a relational provider who gives out of his love, grace, and mercy. The provision of God is a demonstration of his character, his care for us, his desire to see us prosper, and his commitment to our well-being. This is why we can trust in God's provision, even in the most uncertain of circumstances. He is not a provider who gives sporadically or according to our merit. His provision flows continually because his nature is to give. This is the foundation of our security as human beings, knowing that God is always faithful to provide. Furthermore, God's provision is not just about giving us what we need to survive. It is about equipping us to fulfill the greater purpose for which we were created. God does not just supply the minimum, he equips us abundantly so that we can go beyond survival to thriving. In a world full of lack and scarcity, God's provision invites us into his kingdom of abundance. It is through his provision that we can dream, create, and accomplish the work he has called us to do. When God provides, he does not only meet our immediate needs, he prepares us for the next step, the next phase of our journey. His provision is always forward-thinking. It is designed to equip us for the future, enabling us to fulfill his greater plan for our lives. This provision is also one of growth. God does not simply give us what we need when we are weak or incapable. He empowers us to grow in strength and maturity. His provision comes not as a one-time handout, but as a continuous flow that builds our capacity to receive and use his resources. In fact, part of the divine provision is the process of preparing us to handle what he gives. The very act of receiving from God is meant to stretch us, to develop our character, and to increase our ability to manage his resources wisely. Through his provision, we are also being prepared to be stewards of his kingdom, responsible for all that he entrusts to us. God's provision is also intimately tied to his will. It is not an arbitrary, random act. His provision always aligns with his greater purpose for our lives. Sometimes what we think we need and what God knows we need are not the same. His provision is always perfectly aligned with the course he has set for us, which means that sometimes we must trust him when we do not immediately understand why something is happening. In these moments, God's provision may look different than what we imagined it would be. Yet it is always exactly what we need, and it always serves his higher purpose. This is why the key to experiencing God's provision is surrendering our will to his. It is in surrender that we position ourselves to receive his best provision, trusting that he knows what is truly best for us. Additionally, God's provision is not limited by the world's limitations. The resources of this world are finite, but God's resources are limitless. He has no need to adhere to the laws of scarcity because his abundance has no end. When the world says that there is not enough, God's provision tells a different story. When resources appear limited or situations seem impossible, God steps in to provide in ways that surpass human understanding. He can make a way where there is no way, and he can provide abundantly in times of lack. This is a core truth that believers must grasp, that God is not bound by the natural limitations of the world. He is the creator, and he operates in the realm of the supernatural, where all things are possible. Moreover, God's provision is not a sign of human effort or accomplishment, but of divine grace. This is crucial because it challenges the worldview that success and provision come from human striving alone. While work, effort, and responsibility are important, we must not forget that all provision ultimately comes from God. It is not our efforts that provide for us, but God's grace that empowers us to achieve what we have. God is the ultimate provider, and our success and sustenance are a reflection of his favor and grace. This perspective shifts our understanding of work, success, and provision. We are not self-made individuals. We are recipients of God's abundant grace. Living in alignment with God's provision also requires trust and faith. Faith is the key that unlocks the door to experiencing God's provision in our lives. Faith is not simply believing that God exists or that he can provide. It is living with the assurance that he will provide, even when the circumstances suggest otherwise. Trusting in God's provision means believing that he knows our needs even before we ask, and that he is already at work in our lives, preparing everything necessary for our growth, development, and fulfillment of purpose. It means letting go of fear, worry, and anxiety, and instead living in the peace that comes from knowing that God is always with us, supplying all that we need. Finally, God's provision is a reminder of his character and his love for us. Every provision, big or small, is a reflection of God's faithfulness, kindness, and generosity. It is his way of showing us that he is present with us, guiding us and equipping us to live out his will. When we receive from God, we are reminded of his constant care for us, his intimate knowledge of our needs, and his unchanging goodness. This should evoke gratitude in our hearts and a greater desire to honor him with the provision he gives. In every provision, we see the heart of a loving father who desires to bless his children, not out of obligation, but out of his abundant love. In essence, God's provision is not just about meeting needs. It is a testament to his nature as a loving, generous, and faithful father who desires to see his children thrive. It is a reminder that we are never alone in our journey, and that in every season of life, God is with us, providing all that we need to fulfill our divine purpose. The provision of God is a continual reminder of his greatness and his care for his creation, calling us to live in full dependence on him and to acknowledge that everything we have comes from his hand. Understanding who God is transforms how we live. He is not distant or detached. He is personal and present. To know him is to step into the fullness of life, walking in purpose and destiny. Seek him and you will find him. Know him and you will know yourself. Embrace him and you will never be the same. Thank you.